The red wine tasted like copper pennies and broken promises, but I kept drinking it anyway. That should have been my first clue that everything in my life was about to go straight to hell. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. My name is Pete Callahan, and I'm 39 years old with the kind of face that screams ex-cop turned mall security, which is exactly what I am, minus the mall part. These days, I work private security for Henderson's grocery chain, where my biggest excitement comes from catching teenagers shoplifting energy drinks and watching soccer moms have meltdowns over expired coupons. Pete, you're not even listening to me, Marissa said from across our kitchen table, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around her own wine glass. My wife of 15 years had the kind of beauty that aged like fine wine, expensive and getting more bitter by the year. I'm listening, I lied, taking another sip of the metallic-tasting wine. You were talking about the Henderson property again. The Henderson estate, Pete. Not property, estate. She rolled her eyes with the practiced disdain of someone who'd been perfecting the gesture for decades. Vince thinks we should make an offer before it goes to market. Vince Carbone. The name made my jaw clench involuntarily. Marissa's business partner in her real estate ventures, a smooth-talking developer who wore $1,000 suits and drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. He had the kind of confidence that came from never having been punched in the mouth, which was something I was increasingly tempted to remedy. Since when do you and Vince make decisions about our finances? I asked, keeping my voice level. Years of police work had taught me how to stay calm when everything inside me wanted to explode. Since you decided that playing security guard was more important than building a real future, Marissa snapped back. Vince understands ambition, Pete. He understands what it takes to succeed in this world. The kitchen door swung open and our daughter Lexi walked in, home from college for the weekend. At 19, she had inherited her mother's looks, but thankfully seemed to have gotten my bullshit detector instead of Marissa's social climbing instincts. Hey, Dad, she said, giving me a genuine smile before turning to her mother with considerably less enthusiasm. Mom. Lexi, sweetie, tell your father he should listen to Vince's advice about the Henderson deal, Marissa said, immediately trying to drag our daughter into our argument. Lexi grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and leaned against the counter, studying both of us with the kind of analytical gaze that reminded me why she was majoring in psychology. Maybe Dad doesn't want to take business advice from a guy who wears more cologne than a teenage boy on prom night. I nearly choked on my wine. Lexi. What? I'm just saying Vince seems like the kind of guy who thinks a firm handshake can solve world hunger, she continued, her voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm I'd apparently passed down to her. Plus, didn't his last development project end up being built on contaminated soil? Marissa's face flushed red. Vince had nothing to do with that environmental report. That was the city's responsibility. Right, Lexi said, taking a long drink of her water. I'm sure he had no idea. Just like he probably has no idea that his construction crews use undocumented workers and pay them half the minimum wage. Where did you hear that? Marissa demanded. College, Mom. It's this amazing place where they teach you to research things before you trust people. Lexi's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. You should try it sometime. The tension in the kitchen was thick enough to slice with a knife. I found myself caught between pride in my daughter's intelligence and concern about the obvious animosity between her and her mother. When had things gotten so bad between them? I think I need some air, I said, standing up from the table. The wine was making my head feel fuzzy, and the last thing I wanted was to get dragged into a fight between Marissa and Lexi. Running away again, Marissa muttered under her breath. Just like always. I stopped at the kitchen door and turned back to face her. I'm not running away, Marissa. I'm choosing not to engage in whatever game you're playing tonight. Game? Her voice rose to that pitch that meant we were about to have a real fight. This isn't the game, Pete. This is our future. This is about whether we're going to spend the rest of our lives scraping by on your security guard salary or actually build something meaningful. And what exactly would be meaningful to you, Marissa? More money? A bigger house? A husband who wears expensive suits and drives a car that costs more than most people make in a year? The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. I could see something flicker across Marissa's face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. I want a husband who has ambition, she said finally. I want a husband who doesn't give up on his dreams the first time things get difficult. I didn't give up on my dreams, Marissa. I gave up on a job that was slowly killing me from the inside out. I could feel old anger rising in my chest, the kind that came from having this same argument too many times. I spent 10 years as a cop, dealing with the worst humanity has to offer. I've seen things that would give you nightmares for months. And when I finally decided I wanted a job where I could come home at night without wondering if I was going to end up dead in an alley, you act like I committed some kind of betrayal. You could have done something else in law enforcement. Detective work, federal agencies, private investigation. Instead, you chose to become a mall cop. I'm not a mall cop, I said through gritted teeth. I run security for a chain of grocery stores. I have a team of 12 people under me, and we handle everything from employee theft to armed robberies. It's honest work, and it pays the bills. Barely, Marissa shot back. Lexi cleared her throat loudly. Okay, I think I'm going to go upstairs and let you two work through whatever this is about. She paused at the kitchen door and looked back at us. But for what it's worth, Dad, I think what you do is important. Not everyone needs to wear a suit to make a difference. After she left, the kitchen felt even smaller and more suffocating. Marissa and I stared at each other across the table, years of unspoken resentments hanging between us like a wall. She's a good kid, I said finally. She's 19, Pete. She doesn't understand how the real world works yet. Marissa's voice had lost some of its edge, but the underlying tension was still there. She doesn't understand that good intentions don't pay for college tuition or retirement, or any of the 1,000 things we're going to need money for in the next 20 years. And you think Vince Carbone is going to solve all our financial problems? Marissa looked down at her wine glass, swirling the dark liquid around like she was reading tea leaves. I think Vince understands opportunities that you're too proud to see. There it was again. Vince, Vince, Vince. Everything came back to Vince Carbone, and his expensive suits and his smooth talk and his promises of easy money. I'd met the man exactly 3 times, and each time I'd come away feeling like I needed a shower. What kind of opportunities, Marissa? She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that I couldn't quite identify. Fear? Excitement? Guilt? The Henderson estate is going to be worth millions once it's developed properly, she said. Vince has connections with the city planning department. He knows which way the zoning is going to go, which areas are going to be approved for commercial development. If we get in early, we could make enough money to retire comfortably. And what exactly does getting in early involve? An investment. A partnership with Vince's development company. How much of an investment? Marissa hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. $50,000. I nearly dropped my wine glass. $50,000? Marissa, we don't have $50,000. We barely have $5,000 in savings. We could get a second mortgage on the house. Absolutely not. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but the idea of risking our home on one of Vince Carbone's get-rich-quick schemes made my blood pressure spike. I'm not putting our house on the line for some real estate speculation. It's not speculation, Pete. It's a sure thing. Vince has inside information. Inside information. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marissa, do you hear yourself right now? You're talking about risking our home based on inside information from a guy who wears more hair gel than a 1950s lounge singer. You don't know Vince like I do, she said, and something in her tone made me look at her more closely. He's not what you think he is. What I think he is a smooth-talking con artist who preys on people's dreams of easy money. He's successful, Pete. He's built a real business from nothing. He understands how to make money work for you instead of the other way around. I studied my wife's face in the dim kitchen light. After 15 years of marriage, I thought I knew all her expressions, all her tells. But there was something different about the way she talked about Vince Carbone. Something that made my cop instinct start tingling. How much time have you been spending with Vince lately? I asked. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. How much time have you been spending with him? You've been coming home late from work 3 nights a week for the past month. You've been taking calls in the other room. You've been talking about him constantly. I leaned forward across the table. So I'm asking you directly, how much time have you been spending with Vince Carbone? Marissa's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, anger, and something that might have been panic. He's my business partner, Pete. Of course I spend time with him. We're working on several deals together. What kind of deals? Real estate deals, property acquisitions, development projects, investment opportunities. And these deals require you to work late into the evening 3 nights a week? Sometimes business doesn't happen during normal business hours, Pete. Sometimes you have to be available when opportunities present themselves. I nodded slowly, processing her words and the way she was saying them. Something was definitely wrong here, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. I'm going to ask you one more time, Marissa, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. I kept my voice calm and level, the way I used to when I was interrogating suspects. Is there anything about your relationship with Vince Carbone that I should know about? She met my eyes directly, and for a moment I thought she was going to tell me the truth. Whatever the truth was. Vince is my business partner, she said finally. Nothing more, nothing less. And if you can't trust me enough to support a legitimate business opportunity, then maybe we have bigger problems than money. She stood up from the table and walked to the sink, rinsing out her wine glass with more force than necessary. The conversation was over, but the questions in my head were just getting started. I finished my wine and tried to ignore the metallic taste that seemed to be getting stronger. Outside, I could hear the sound of rain starting to fall against the kitchen windows. It was going to be a long night. The next morning brought gray skies and a headache that felt like someone was using my skull for drum practice. I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying my conversation with Marissa and trying to figure out why every instinct I'd developed during 10 years of police work was screaming that something was wrong. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee when Lexi came downstairs, already dressed and ready for her Saturday morning run. She'd inherited my early rising habits, along with my suspicious nature. "Mom still asleep?" she asked, grabbing a banana from the fruit bowl. "As far as I know." I hadn't seen Marissa since she'd gone upstairs after our argument the night before. She'd been asleep when I finally came to bed, and she was still asleep when I got up at 6. Lexi sat down across from me and studied my face with the kind of intensity that made me understand why her psychology professors probably loved her. "You look like hell, Dad." "Thanks. That's exactly what every man wants to hear from his daughter on a Saturday morning. I'm serious. You've been looking stressed lately, more stressed than usual." She peeled her banana and took a bite. "Is everything okay with you and Mom?" I considered how to answer that question. Lexi was 19, not 9. She was smart enough to see the tension between her parents, and she deserved an honest answer. But how much honesty was appropriate? "Your mother and I are going through a rough patch," I said finally. "We have different ideas about our future, different priorities. It happens in marriages sometimes." "Different ideas about Vince Carbone, you mean?" I looked at her sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Because every time Mom mentions his name, you look like you want to punch something. And every time you question her judgment about business, she brings up Vince like he's some kind of financial guru." Lexi finished her banana and tossed the peel in the trash. "Plus, I'm not blind, Dad. I've seen the way she acts when he calls." "What do you mean?" "She gets this look on her face, like she's excited about something, and she always takes his calls in another room, even when it's supposedly about business." Lexi leaned forward across the table. "Dad, I need to tell you something, but I want you to promise you won't freak out." My stomach dropped. "What is it? Promise me first." "Lexi, if this is about your mother, promise me, Dad, I'm serious." I looked at my daughter's face and saw something there that made me realize this wasn't a typical father-daughter conversation. This was something bigger. "Okay, I promise I won't freak out. What is it?" She took a deep breath. "Last month, when I was home for spring break, I saw Mom and Vince together." "Together how?" Together, at that expensive restaurant downtown, Romano's. They were holding hands across the table, and when they got up to leave, he kissed her. Not a business partner kiss, Dad. A real kiss. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. I could feel my hands starting to shake, so I put my cup down on the table before I dropped it. "Are you sure it was them?" "I'm sure. I was there with some friends from high school, and we were sitting in the back corner. They didn't see me, but I saw them clearly. And Dad," she hesitated. "They looked happy. Really happy. Like they were celebrating something." I stared at my daughter's face, trying to process what she was telling me. Part of me had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed felt like being punched in the stomach by someone wearing brass knuckles. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept hoping there was some innocent explanation." Tears were starting to form in her eyes. "I didn't want to be the one to destroy our family." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Lexi, listen to me. You didn't destroy anything. If what you saw is what I think it is, then your mother and I have problems that have nothing to do with you. But what if I'm wrong? What if it was just a business dinner and I misunderstood what I saw? Did it look like a business dinner? She shook her head. No, it looked like a date. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us trying to figure out what to do with this information. Outside, the rain was getting heavier, drumming against the windows like an impatient visitor. Dad, there's something else. What? I think Vince might be married. This time I did drop my coffee cup. It hit the table with a crash that sent coffee splashing across the surface and onto the floor. What makes you think that? I looked him up online after I saw them together. Social media, business websites, local news articles. In some of the older photos, there's a woman who appears with him at charity events and business functions. The captions identify her as his wife, Angela Carbone. I grabbed some paper towels and started cleaning up the spilled coffee, mainly to give my hands something to do while my brain tried to process this new information. Maybe they're divorced. Maybe. But if they are, it happened recently. There's a photo from last Christmas at a hospital charity event, and she's wearing a wedding ring. Jesus Christ. Dad, I'm scared. If Mom is having an affair with a married man, and if she's talking about investing our money in his business... Lexi trailed off, but I could see in her eyes that she understood the implications as clearly as I did. Your mother isn't stupid, Lexi. Whatever's going on, she has to know the risks. But what if she doesn't care about the risks? What if she's so caught up in whatever she thinks she has with Vince that she's not thinking clearly? That was exactly what I was afraid of. I'd seen it happen before, during my years as a cop. Smart, rational people who made catastrophically bad decisions because they were thinking with their hearts instead of their heads. Or in some cases, thinking with other parts of their anatomy. What are you going to do? Lexi asked. I don't know yet. I need to think about this. Are you going to confront Mom? Eventually. But first I need to find out exactly what's going on. If your mother is having an affair, I need proof. If she's planning to invest our money in Vince's business, I need to understand what kind of business we're talking about. And if Vince Carbone is still married, I need to know who his wife is and what she knows about all this. Lexi nodded. What can I do to help? Nothing. This is between your mother and me. Dad, I'm not a child anymore. If our family is falling apart, I have a right to know what's happening. She was right, of course, but the protective father in me wanted to shield her from the uglier realities of adult relationships and human betrayal. Let me handle this, Lexi. Please. If I need your help, I'll ask for it. She looked like she wanted to argue, but before she could say anything, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Marissa was finally awake. Not a word about this conversation, I whispered to Lexi. She nodded, just as Marissa walked into the kitchen, wearing her silk robe and looking like she'd slept better than I had in weeks. Good morning, she said, kissing the top of Lexi's head and giving me a smile that might have been genuine or might have been completely fake. After 15 years of marriage, I was starting to realize I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Morning, I replied. Coffee's fresh. Thanks. She poured herself a cup and sat down at the table. I was thinking we could go out for brunch today. That new place on 5th Street has been getting good reviews. I can't, Lexi said quickly. I'm meeting some friends downtown this afternoon. What about you, Pete? Are you free for brunch with your wife? There was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't just a casual invitation. This was some kind of peace offering, or maybe an attempt to smooth over our argument from the night before. Sure, I said. Brunch sounds good. But as I watched Marissa sip her coffee and chat casually with Lexi about college classes and weekend plans, all I could think about was the image my daughter had painted. My wife holding hands with another man in an expensive restaurant, looking happier than she'd looked with me in months. The rain kept falling outside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was washing away more than just the dirt from our sidewalks. Brunch at Cafe Luna turned out to be an exercise in advanced acting. Marissa played the role of loving wife perfectly, touching my hand when she laughed, asking about my work, suggesting we plan a weekend getaway. I played the role of unsuspecting husband, nodding and smiling and pretending I didn't know what I knew. But underneath the performance, I was studying her like a suspect in an interrogation room. The way she checked her phone every few minutes. The way she seemed distracted, even when she was talking directly to me. The way she kept mentioning Vince's name in casual conversation, as if she was testing my reaction. Vince was telling me about this new restaurant that just opened in the warehouse district, she said over her eggs Benedict. Apparently, it's getting fantastic reviews. We should try it sometime. Sure, I said. Sounds good. He says the chef used to work at some famous place in New York. Very trendy, very upscale. How does Vince know so much about trendy restaurants? He entertains clients there. Business dinners, that sort of thing. She took a sip of her mimosa. He says presentation is everything in real estate. You have to show people that you're successful if you want them to trust you with their money. Makes sense. We finished brunch without any major confrontations, but by the time we got home, I'd made a decision. I needed to know more about Vince Carbone, and I needed to know more about his wife. If I was going to confront Marissa about what Lexi had seen, I wanted to have all the facts first. That afternoon, while Marissa was out shopping and Lexi was downtown with her friends, I sat down at my computer and started doing the kind of research that 10 years of police work had taught me how to do properly. Vince Carbone, age 41, owner of Carbone Development, LLC. Clean criminal record, no outstanding warrants, no liens or judgments. On paper, he looked like exactly what he claimed to be. A successful small-time developer who specialized in commercial properties and residential subdivisions. But when I started digging deeper, things got more interesting. Carbone Development had been involved in 3 major projects over the past 5 years. 2 of them had been completed successfully and profitably. The third one, a luxury condominium complex called Riverside Gardens, had run into serious problems with environmental contamination, just like Lexi had mentioned. The project had been shut down by the EPA, and several investors had lost significant amounts of money. More interesting was the fact that Vince had apparently known about the contamination issues months before they became public. Internal emails that had been released during the subsequent lawsuit showed that he'd been warned by his own environmental consultants that the soil samples were showing dangerous levels of heavy metals and industrial chemicals. But instead of halting the project, he'd continued taking money from investors right up until the EPA shut him down. Most of the investors had been small-time players, retired couples looking to diversify their portfolios, young professionals trying to get into real estate investment, middle-class families hoping to build wealth for their children's college funds, people who couldn't afford to lose the money they'd invested, people like Marissa and me. I printed out copies of the relevant court documents and newspaper articles, then moved on to researching Vince's personal life. Angela Marie Carbone, née Rodriguez, age 38, married to Vincent Carbone for 12 years, no children. She worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital and seemed to keep a much lower profile than her husband. Her social media presence was minimal, a few photos from charity events and family gatherings, but nothing recent. In fact, the most recent photo I could find of Angela and Vince together was from 8 months ago at a hospital fundraiser. They were standing next to each other, smiling for the camera, but there was something stiff and formal about their body language. They looked like business associates posing for a corporate newsletter, not like a married couple celebrating their anniversary. I was studying that photo when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Doug Martinez, my old partner from the police department. "Pete, how the hell are you?" "I'm good, Doug. What's going on?" "I was just thinking about you. We had a domestic disturbance call this morning that reminded me of that crazy case we worked on back in '09. Remember the guy who thought his wife was cheating on him with their marriage counselor?" "Yeah, I remember." Turned out he was right. Exactly. Sometimes paranoia is just good instincts. Doug paused. "Speaking of which, you sound like hell. Everything okay?" Doug had always been able to read people over the phone. It was one of the things that had made him a good cop and a good partner. "I'm fine. Just dealing with some personal stuff." "Personal stuff involving that wife of yours?" I hesitated. Doug and I had been partners for 6 years. He'd saved my life twice, and I'd saved his once. If there was anyone I could trust with this situation, it was him. "Maybe. I'm not sure yet. You want to talk about it?" "Not over the phone. Are you free for a beer later?" "Always. Murphy's Tavern at 7. See you there." After I hung up, I went back to my research. I was looking for any connection between Vince Carbone and the real estate company where Marissa worked, when I found something that made my blood run cold. 3 months ago, Marissa had been listed as a co-signatory on a business loan application for Carbone Development, LLC. The loan was for $250,000, and it was secured by residential property. Our residential property. I stared at the document on my computer screen, reading it over and over again. trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Marissa had used our house as collateral for a $250,000 loan to Vince Carbone's company. Without telling me, without even asking me. My hands were shaking as I printed out the loan documents. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a middle-aged woman having a midlife crisis with a smooth-talking developer. This was financial fraud. This was theft. This was my wife stealing our home to fund her boyfriend's business. I was still staring at the documents when I heard Marissa's car in the driveway. I quickly closed the browser windows and shoved the printed pages into a folder, then walked to the kitchen and tried to look casual. "Hi, honey," Marissa called out as she came through the front door with shopping bags from 3 different stores. "I found the most amazing dress at Nordstrom. You're going to love it." "Great," I managed to say. "I'm looking forward to seeing it." She walked into the kitchen and kissed me on the cheek, and I had to fight the urge to pull away from her. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years had just stolen our house without telling me, and she was acting like nothing had happened. "What have you been up to this afternoon?" she asked, setting her shopping bags on the counter. "Just reading, catching up on some work stuff." "Anything interesting?" "Not really, just routine security reports." She nodded and started unpacking her bags, chattering about her shopping trip and the sales she'd found and the people she'd run into at the mall. I watched her and listened to her voice, and I realized that I didn't know this woman at all. The Marissa I'd married would never have forged my signature on a loan document. The Marissa I'd married would never have risked our home for any reason, let alone to fund her lover's business ventures. But apparently, the Marissa I'd married didn't exist anymore. If she ever had. "I'm going out for a beer with Doug tonight," I said, when she paused for breath. "That sounds nice. I might call Vince and see if he wants to grab dinner and go over those Henderson property contracts." The casual way she said his name, the easy lie about business contracts, the complete lack of guilt or shame in her voice, it all hit me like a physical blow. "Sure," I said. "Have fun." As I watched her carry her shopping bags upstairs, I wondered how long this had been going on. How long had she been lying to me, stealing from me, planning a future that didn't include me? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Murphy's Tavern hadn't changed in the 5 years since I'd left the force. Same dim lighting, same scarred wooden tables, same smell of beer and fried food, and the kind of honest sweat that came from people who worked real jobs for real money. It was the kind of place where cops went to complain about their shifts, and their supervisors, and their ex-wives, which made it perfect for what I needed to discuss with Doug. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in our old corner booth with 2 beers and the kind of expression that meant he'd been thinking about our phone conversation all afternoon. "You look like someone ran over your dog," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. Worse than that. I took a long drink of my beer and tried to figure out where to start. "Doug, if I tell you something, can you promise me it stays between us? At least for now?" "You know you don't have to ask me that." I pulled the folder out of my jacket and spread the loan documents across the table. My wife forged my signature on a $250,000 loan using our house as collateral. Doug's eyebrows went up as he scanned the documents. "Jesus Christ, Pete. When did you find this?" "This afternoon." But it gets worse. I told him about Lexi seeing Marissa and Vince together at the restaurant, about the late-night phone calls and the secretive behavior, about Vince's history with the Riverside Gardens project and the investors who'd lost their money. By the time I finished, Doug was leaning back in his seat with the kind of expression he used to get when we were working a case that was about to get very complicated. "So let me make sure I understand this," he said. "Your wife is having an affair with a married developer who has a history of screwing over investors. She's forged your signature to secure a loan for his business using your house as collateral, and she's been lying to you about all of it for months. That's about the size of it. Pete, this isn't just a marriage problem. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, forgery. If you wanted to press charges..." "I don't want to press charges," I said quickly. "At least not yet. I want to understand what's really going on first. What's going on is that your wife is stealing from you to fund her boyfriend's business. But why? Marissa isn't stupid, Doug. She has to know the risks. She has to know that if Vince's business fails, we lose our house. So why would she do something like this?" Doug took a drink of his beer and studied my face. "You really want to know what I think?" "Yeah. I think she's planning to leave you. I think she and Vince have been planning this for months. She's using your house to capitalize his business, and once the money comes through, they're going to disappear together." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. mainly because they made perfect sense. If Marissa was planning to divorce me anyway, she wouldn't care about the risk to our house. She'd get half of everything in the divorce, including whatever profits Vince made from his investments. There's something else, I said. Vince is still married. His wife doesn't know about the affair. You sure about that? Pretty sure. I looked her up online. Angela Carbone. She's a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. No recent photos with Vince. No social media activity that suggests any problems in the marriage. Doug nodded thoughtfully. So we've got a married developer having an affair with your wife, using forged documents to steal your house, with a history of screwing over investors. This guy's a real piece of work. The question is, what do I do about it? What do you want to do about it? I've been asking myself that question all afternoon, and I still wasn't sure of the answer. Part of me wanted to confront Marissa directly, to throw the loan documents on the kitchen table and demand an explanation. Part of me wanted to call a lawyer and start divorce proceedings immediately. And part of me, the part that remembered what it felt like to be a cop, wanted to make Vince Carbone pay for what he was doing to me and to his wife and to all the other people he'd screwed over. I want them both to understand that actions have consequences, I said finally. Doug smiled, and I recognized the expression. It was the same look he used to get when we were planning a complicated arrest operation. Tell me what you need. Over the next hour, we worked out a plan. It wasn't complicated, but it would require careful timing and a little bit of luck. Most importantly, it would give me the leverage I needed to protect myself financially and personally. First thing we need is more information about Angela Carbone, Doug said. If we're going to approach her about her husband's affair, we need to know what kind of person we're dealing with. Is she going to be cooperative? Or is she going to warn Vince that someone's onto him? How do we find that out? Leave that to me. I still have contacts at the hospital. I can make some discreet inquiries, find out what her coworkers think of her, whether she's the type to stand by her cheating husband or throw him under the bus. What about the loan documents? Can we use those to stop the money from being dispersed? Maybe. Depends on how far along the process is. If the loan hasn't been funded yet, you might be able to file a fraud complaint with the bank. If it has been funded, Doug shrugged. That gets more complicated. And if I decide I want to confront Marissa directly, then you need to be prepared for the possibility that she's going to deny everything. She's going to claim the signature is legitimate, that you knew about the loan and forgot, that the whole thing is a misunderstanding. Doug leaned forward across the table. Pete, you need to understand something. Once you start this process, there's no going back. Your marriage is over. Even if Marissa agrees to cooperate, even if she breaks things off with Vince and tries to make things right, you're never going to trust her again. He was right, of course. The moment I'd seen those loan documents, something had broken between Marissa and me that could never be repaired. Not the affair. I might have been able to forgive the affair, given time and counseling and genuine remorse on her part. But the theft, the forgery, the calculated betrayal of everything we'd built together, that was unforgivable. I know, I said. My marriage was over the moment she signed my name to those documents. Then let's make sure she doesn't get away with it. We shook hands across the table, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my situation. Marissa and Vince thought they were playing a game where they held all the cards. They were about to find out how wrong they were. One more thing, Doug said as we were getting ready to leave. What about Lexi? How much does she know about all this? She knows about the affair. She doesn't know about the loan documents. You're going to have to tell her eventually. She's going to be caught in the middle of whatever happens next. I know. But I want to have a plan first. I want to be able to tell her that I'm handling the situation, not that I'm falling apart because of it. Doug nodded. Just don't wait too long. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. She probably already knows more than you think she does. As I drove home through the rain, I thought about Lexi and how this was going to affect her. She was 19 years old, just starting to figure out her own life, and now she was going to have to deal with her parents' divorce and all the ugliness that would come with it. But there was no way around it. Marissa had made her choices, and now everyone was going to have to live with the consequences, including me. I got home to find the house dark, except for the light in Lexi's room upstairs. Marissa's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was still out with Vince, probably planning their next move while I was planning mine. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of the same red wine that had tasted like copper pennies the night before. Tonight, it tasted like betrayal and broken promises. But I drank it anyway. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the loan documents and trying to figure out my next move, when Lexi came downstairs in her pajamas. "Dad? I thought I heard you come in." She looked around the kitchen. "Where's Mom?" "Out with Vince. Business dinner, according to her." Lexi sat down across from me and noticed the papers spread across the table. "What's all this?" I hesitated. Doug was right. Lexi was going to be caught in the middle of whatever happened next, and she deserved to know what she was dealing with. But once I told her about the loan documents, there would be no pretending that this was just a simple marital problem that might work itself out. "Your mother forged my signature on a loan document," I said finally. "She used our house as collateral for a $250,000 loan to Vince's business." Lexi's face went pale. "She did what?" I showed her the documents, explaining what they meant and what the implications were for our family. I watched her expression change, from shock to anger to something that looked like fear. "Dad, this means we could lose the house." "Yes. If Vince's business fails and he can't repay the loan, the bank can foreclose on our house." But Mom had to know that. She had to understand what she was risking. I think she understood perfectly. I think she and Vince are planning to leave together once the money comes through. Lexi stared at the documents for a long moment, then looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "How could she do this to us? How could she risk everything we have for some guy she's been seeing for a few months?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I wish I had an answer for you." "What are you going to do?" I told her about my conversation with Doug, about our plan to gather more information and figure out the best way to handle the situation. I didn't tell her about some of the more aggressive options we'd discussed, but I could see in her eyes that she understood this wasn't going to end quietly. "What can I do to help?" "Nothing. This is between your mother and me. Dad, she stole our house. She's planning to abandon us for some sleazy developer who's probably just using her. This isn't just between you and Mom anymore. She was right, but the protective father in me still wanted to shield her from the worst of what was coming. Let me handle this, Lexi. Please." Before she could argue, we heard a car in the driveway. Marissa was home. "Not a word about this conversation," I whispered, quickly gathering up the loan documents. Lexi nodded, but I could see the anger burning in her eyes. She was going to have a hard time pretending everything was normal. Marissa came through the front door humming some song I didn't recognize, looking happier than she'd looked in months. She was wearing the new dress she'd bought that afternoon, and her hair and makeup were perfect. She looked like a woman who'd just spent the evening with a man who made her feel beautiful and desirable and important. "Hi, guys," she said, breezing into the kitchen. "You're both up late." "Couldn't sleep," I said. "How was dinner?" "Wonderful. Vince took me to that new place I was telling you about, Romano's. The food was incredible." She poured herself a glass of wine and sat down at the table. "We went over the Henderson contracts, and everything looks good. We should be able to close on the property within the next 2 weeks." The casual way she lied to my face was almost impressive. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have believed her completely. "That's great," I said. "Sounds like a good investment." "It is. Vince really knows what he's doing when it comes to real estate development. I'm learning so much from him." Lexi made a small sound that might have been a snort of disgust. Marissa looked at her sharply. "Is something wrong, Lexi?" "No, Mom. Nothing's wrong." "You've been acting strange lately. Distant. Is everything okay at school?" "School's fine." "Are you having problems with your friends? Boyfriend trouble?" "I said I'm fine, Mom." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marissa looked back and forth between Lexi and me, and I could see her starting to realize that something was wrong. "Did something happen while I was out?" "Nothing happened," I said. "We were just talking about Lexi's summer plans." "What summer plans?" Lexi stood up from the table. "I think I'm going to go to bed. It's been a long day." She kissed me on the forehead and started to leave the kitchen, but Marissa called after her. "Lexi, wait. I feel like we haven't really talked in weeks. Is there something you want to tell me?" Lexi stopped at the kitchen door and turned around. For a moment, I thought she was going to confront Marissa directly, to throw everything out in the open right there in the kitchen. Instead, she just looked at her mother with an expression I'd never seen before. "No, Mom. There's nothing I want to tell you." After she left, Marissa and I sat in silence for a few minutes. I could see her trying to figure out what had just happened, what she'd missed, what the undercurrent of tension was about. "Pete, is everything okay between us?" "What do you mean?" I mean, you've been acting strange too. Ever since our argument last night, you've been distant. And now Lexi's acting like she can barely stand to be in the same room with me. She reached across the table and touched my hand. If there's something wrong, I want to fix it. The irony was overwhelming. My wife, who was having an affair and had stolen our house to fund her boyfriend's business, was worried that something might be wrong in our relationship. I'm fine, Marissa. Just tired. Are you sure? Because if this is about the Henderson investment, we can talk about it. I know you have concerns about working with Vince, but I really think this could be good for us. What exactly is our involvement in the Henderson deal? What do you mean? I mean, what are we investing? How much money are we putting up? And what kind of return are we expecting? She hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. She was trying to figure out how much to tell me, how much she could get away with without revealing the full scope of what she and Vince were doing. It's complicated, she said finally. There are several different investment options, different levels of involvement. Vince is putting together a comprehensive proposal for us to review. When will I see this proposal? Soon. Maybe next week. I'd like to meet with Vince directly, to go over the numbers, understand the risks, that sort of thing. The look of panic that flashed across her face was almost comical. I don't think that's necessary, Pete. I can explain everything to you. I'm sure you can. But if we're talking about investing a significant amount of money, I want to hear the details from the horse's mouth. Vince is very busy. He's got multiple projects going on, investors to manage, contractors to supervise. I don't know if he has time for a meeting. Then maybe we shouldn't be investing with him. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I could see her trying to figure out how to handle this situation. She needed my cooperation, or at least my ignorance, for whatever she and Vince were planning. But she also couldn't afford to let me get too close to the details of their scheme. Let me talk to Vince, she said finally. I'll see if we can set up a meeting sometime next week. Great, I'm looking forward to it. She finished her wine and stood up from the table. I think I'm going to go to bed. It's been a long day. As she walked toward the stairs, I called after her. Marissa? Yes? I love you. You know that, right? She turned around and looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been guilt, or regret, or genuine sadness. I love you too, Pete. But as I watched her walk upstairs, I realized that we were probably talking about two completely different kinds of love. The kind I was talking about was built on trust and honesty and shared commitment to our family's future. The kind she was talking about was just words. The call from Doug came at 6:30 the next morning, while I was drinking coffee and trying to figure out how to get through another day of pretending everything was normal. I've got information about Angela Carbone, he said, without preamble, and you're going to want to hear this. I'm listening. She's not the innocent victim we thought she was. According to my contact at the hospital, Angela's been suspicious about her husband's activities for months. She's been asking questions, making phone calls, trying to figure out where all his money is coming from. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest she thinks he might be involved in something illegal. Money laundering, tax evasion, that sort of thing. Apparently she's been talking to a divorce lawyer. This was better than I'd hoped for. If Angela was already suspicious of Vince and considering divorce, she might be willing to cooperate with my plan. There's more, Doug continued. I ran a more detailed background check on Vince's business. That Riverside Gardens project wasn't his first failure. He's been involved in 3 other developments over the past 10 years that ended badly for investors. Same pattern? Exactly the same. He takes money from small-time investors, uses it to fund his lifestyle and other projects. Then, when things go bad, he declares bankruptcy and walks away while everyone else loses their shirts. How is he still in business? Because he's smart about it. He never takes enough from any one investor to trigger serious criminal charges. He spreads the risk around, makes sure no single person loses enough money to justify hiring expensive lawyers, and he always has plausible explanations for why his projects fail. Until now. Until now. The loan he got using your house as collateral is the biggest single investment he's ever taken. If this project fails, he's looking at serious fraud charges. Which means he can't afford to let it fail. Which means he's probably desperate. Desperate people make stupid decisions, Pete. We can use that. After I hung up with Doug, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what I'd learned. Vince Carbone wasn't just a smooth-talking developer having an affair with my wife. He was a serial con artist who had built his entire business on screwing over people like me. And now he was in a position where he needed this latest scheme to work, or everything would come crashing down around him. That gave me leverage. The question was how to use it. I was still thinking about this when Marissa came downstairs, already dressed for work and looking like she hadn't slept well. "Morning," she said, pouring herself coffee. "You're up early." Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. "Anything you want to talk about?" "Actually, yes. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about the Henderson investment. I'd like to move forward with that meeting with Vince." She nearly dropped her coffee cup. "What?" "The meeting. With Vince. To discuss the investment opportunity." I kept my voice casual, like we were talking about dinner plans. "I think you're right. This could be a good opportunity for us, and I don't want to let my personal feelings about the man get in the way of sound financial planning. Pete, I don't think... How about tonight? I could meet you both for dinner, and we could go over the details." "Tonight's not good. Vince has other commitments." "Tomorrow, then." "He's busy tomorrow, too." "Marissa, when exactly is Vince going to have time to meet with the man whose money he wants to invest?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out what my angle was, why I was suddenly so eager to meet with Vince when I'd been resistant to the idea for weeks. "Let me call him," she said finally. "I'll see what his schedule looks like." "Great. I'll be home by 6 tonight. If he's available, we can meet then." After Marissa left for work, I called Doug and told him about the conversation. "You're forcing their hand," he said. "If they refuse to meet with you, it confirms that something fishy is going on. If they agree to meet, you get a chance to confront Vince directly. And if they try to fake their way through the meeting, then you hit them with the loan documents and watch them scramble to explain how your signature got on papers you never saw. What about Angela Carbone?" "I'm working on that. My contact at the hospital thinks she might be willing to talk, but I need to approach her carefully. If she warns Vince that someone's investigating him, it could blow up our whole plan." "How long do you need?" "Give me until tomorrow. I should know by then whether she's going to cooperate or not." The rest of the day dragged by like a prison sentence. I went through the motions at work, dealing with shoplifters and employee disputes and all the routine problems that seemed completely insignificant compared to what was happening in my personal life. But underneath the routine, I was planning, thinking through different scenarios, trying to anticipate how Marissa and Vince would react when I confronted them, trying to figure out how to protect myself and Lexi from whatever fallout was coming. At 5:30, I got a text from Marissa. "Vince can meet tonight. Romano's Restaurant, 7 p.m. Romano's. The same restaurant where Lexi had seen them together, holding hands and kissing like lovers. The irony was almost poetic. I texted back, "See you there." Then I went home to change clothes and prepare for what was probably going to be the most important conversation of my life. Lexi was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a stack of textbooks. "Dad, Mom said you're meeting her and Vince for dinner tonight." "That's right." "Are you going to confront them?" "I'm going to ask some pointed questions and see how they respond." "Do you want me to come with you?" "Absolutely not. This could get ugly, Lexi. I don't want you anywhere near it." She looked like she wanted to argue, but before she could say anything, my phone rang. It was Doug. "Change of plans," he said. "I just talked to Angela Carbone. She wants to meet with you tonight." "Tonight? I'm supposed to meet with Marissa and Vince at 7. "I know. That's why this is perfect. While you're confronting them at the restaurant, I'm going to bring Angela there to see her husband having a romantic dinner with your wife." "Doug, that's exactly what we need. Visual proof of the affair, witnessed by Vince's wife, in a public place where they can't deny what's happening." I thought about it for a moment. It was risky, but it was also brilliant. If Angela saw her husband with Marissa, she'd have no choice but to face the reality of his betrayal. And if she was already considering divorce, this might push her over the edge. "What time?" 8 o'clock. That should give you enough time to get the business conversation started before we arrive. And if this goes wrong, then we improvise. "But Pete, this is our best shot at getting both of them at the same time. If we can turn Angela against Vince, he loses his most important ally. And if we can expose the affair in front of witnesses, Marissa loses any chance of claiming this was just a business relationship." After I hung up, I realized that Lexi had been listening to my side of the conversation. "Dad, what's going on?" I told her about Angela Carbone and Doug's plan to bring her to the restaurant. I watched her face go through a range of expressions: surprise, concern, and finally, something that looked like grim satisfaction. "Good," she said. "It's time Mom faced the consequences of what she's been doing." "Lexi, I need you to understand something. After tonight, everything changes. Your mother and I are probably going to get divorced. Our family is going to be torn apart. And there's going to be a lot of anger and hurt feelings and legal complications. I know, Dad. But we can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. Mom made her choice when she decided to have an affair and steal our house. Now she has to live with the consequences." I looked at my 19-year-old daughter and realized that somewhere along the way, she'd become wiser and stronger than I'd given her credit for. She understood what was at stake, and she was prepared to handle whatever came next. "I love you, sweetheart." "I love you too, Dad. Now go get ready. You've got a confrontation to win." As I went upstairs to change clothes, I thought about what Doug had said about desperate people making stupid decisions. Tonight, I was going to find out just how desperate Vince Carbone really was. And just how stupid.